All right, we are back on the podcast. We're halfway through an eventful NFL season. Always fun to check in with this guy and discuss the state of the NFL with Pro Football Guru himself, Russell Baxter is here. Russell, how are you?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you? Flying by.
Yeah, it always flies by the NFL season, and unfortunately for the New York team, I feel like it's flying by the wrong way again here, and I feel like both of them are in bad spots here. So let's start there with the Jets, who obviously this season coming in, we had the high hopes. Aaron Rodgers is back. They bring in all the big name talent. All of a sudden, it spirals out of control. The coach is gone. They make some trades. They're 3-6 going in here. Like, from what you've seen as an outside observer here, what's gone wrong with the Jets? And do you think that there's any way they can fix themselves this season?
Well, I think there's always a possibility. I mean, we see teams get off to good starts and then fade, and then we see teams get off to horrendous starts and then catch fire. It's a very streaky league. We've seen a lot of that. We've also seen teams that have gone from last place to first place or last place to a playoff berth in 1 year. Last year, Houston and Cleveland managed that feat. Look at what Washington and Arizona are doing right now. They're both in first place. What's remarkable about them, Mike, is Washington, if they beat Pittsburgh on Sunday, they will have doubled their win total from a year ago. Arizona's got one more win than they did all of last season. The real hook is the fact that both of these teams, think about this, both of these teams went 0-6 in the division last year. Washington this year is 2-0. Arizona is 2-0.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's especially on the Jets, though. Like, what have you noticed about the Jets and what you've seen thus far this year?
Well, I think I've yet to see them play a complete game. There's a choppiness to them, even though they came back and beat Houston. They struggled in the first half. They got a little rhythm going, and hopefully, having a long week doesn't hurt them, and they have to go face Arizona. But I like to remind people because, last year Aaron Rodgers lasted 4 plays. This year he comes back. He's coming off the injury and so on. We see teams get very slow out of the gate. But again, the biggest reminder is, why is anybody surprised? This is a team, and I shouldn't say team. This is an organization that hasn't been to the playoffs since 2010. It is the longest active drought in the league. You know how long ago it was? The last time they were in the playoffs, they damn near played Aaron Rodgers in the Super Bowl.
Yep, I'm well aware, and it's just amazing. Yeah. Like, in a league that's designed to basically turn you from worst to first, or at least being a playoff window like every couple of years, that they were basically going through 4 rebuilds now.
Well, but you look at organizations, okay? What have the Raiders done since they won the Super Bowl 41 years ago? They've been to the playoffs, 2 or 3 times?
Yeah.
Okay, they haven't won a playoff game since the 2002 AFC title game. Dallas can't get back to the NFC title game. Washington can't get back to the NFC title game. Denver's last playoff win and playoff appearance, Mike, Super Bowl 50. So it really comes down to how your organization is functioning. And that's why do we see teams that are constantly in the mix? They don't win it every year, but teams that are constantly in the mix because they have a plan. And I think sometimes with a team like the Jets and other organizations, they don't have a plan. There is that spontaneity to go get this and go to get. Free agency is a wonderful thing if you don't abuse it.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Speaking of organization, where I'm not sure if they have a plan either here, the Giants situation looks pretty bad. They're 2-7 here. They have a quarterback they're probably moving on from at the end of the season here. They had the hope year 1 of the Brian Daboll era that things are going to turn around. They win the playoff game, and then they've gone backwards 2 years row since. I know the owner has said he's bringing them back here. Do you think the situation with the Giants is as bad as it appears right now? You think they're in the Jet Raider, dysfunctional organization mode? You think there's hope here they can
I think they listen, they've been, if you really go back and so on, I mean, they won the Super Bowl in 2011. They didn't get back to the playoffs until 2016, and they lost to the Packers. And then, as you pointed out correctly, they surprised everybody by making the playoffs a couple of years ago and winning a playoff game at Minnesota. I'm not ready to put them in that category yet, but I will say that I think something we learned this offseason via the media and Hard Knocks and so on, it seems like a house divided at the top. How Saquon? It's funny. I hear people how was Saquon Barkley allowed to go to the Eagles? Well, once you allowed him to expose himself to free agency, you had no say on where he was going to go. And I find it funny. Teams make these organizational decisions, and a lot of times they come back at. And I'm going to bring up Barkley for this reason, Mike, because it happened. It's already happened 3 times this year. You will remember this. In 2023, there were 6 players franchised. 3 of them were running backs. They all wound up playing on 1-year contracts, the 3 running backs. Okay? They were Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Tony Pollard. How well are all 3 of those gentlemen doing this year?
Better in the new situations.
Yes. Listen, Tony Pollard's on a terrible team, but Tony Pollard has answered the bell. You think the Cowboys wouldn't mind having Tony Pollard back? But they decided to go in a different. They grabbed Zeke Elliott back. Okay, after they parted ways with him, and right now, he was suspended last week. Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing a couple of years ago, the Raiders didn't pick up the option on him. He played under a 1-year deal. Look what he's doing with Green Bay. And then Barkley, my goodness, right up in contention for Offensive Player of the Year this season. He looks like the Saquon Barkley of his rookie season. So, and as we saw on Hard Knocks, that was not a popular decision as far as parting ways with him or allowing him to hit the open market. So, again, it goes back to how you're running your team from top to bottom. There aren't very many teams that have a great quarterback and a great head coach and a lousy front office.
Yeah, that certainly makes some sense here. We'll see if they have the right mix in the offseason here to try and change some things up here. And everyone wants to get the model of the Chiefs, whereas 2-time reigning Super Bowl champions, they're undefeated right now. It feels like every week it seems like comes down the wire. They make these plays to pull it out at the end here. Like, how much longer do they can go on this undefeated run? Or before you feel somebody trips them up?
Well, I mean, it's going to take the right combination because they're not blowing anyone's doors off. This might surprise you. On Monday night, they beat the Buccaneers 30-24 in overtime. Did you know that was the first time since week 12 last year that the Chiefs actually scored at least 30 points in a game?
I believe. I know they haven't done much offensively the last year and a half.
But in this era of all about the quarterback, and the quarterback can bail out the defense, it really doesn't work that way because the defense really bailed out the Chiefs last year. Steve Spagnuolo's group was absolutely tremendous in the postseason as well. This is a team that's won 14 games in a row. Okay, the last team to beat them was the Chiefs. I'm sorry, was the Raiders on Christmas at Arrowhead Stadium, no less. They won their share of nail biters. It kind of reminds you of the early dynasty days of the Patriots, where they just made the plays necessary to win. Remember, all 3 of their first 3 Super Bowl titles came by 3 points, exactly 3 points, over the Rams, over the Panthers, and over the Eagles. So that's what you're kind of seeing here. You don't have to blow people's doors off, okay? Just win at the end. And, I know Todd Bowles has gotten his share of flack for not going for 2. If he would have missed it, he would have gotten flack for going for 2. But the bottom line is, if you give the Chiefs another chance, they showed it in the Super Bowl in overtime, even though, remember, San Francisco took the lead. With the new Sid, they were able to take the lead. So Kansas City had to score in order to keep that game alive, and they drove for a touchdown. And the thing that's also impressed me is Patrick Mahomes has done a lot more with his legs. We saw it in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, the key run. We saw it in the Super Bowl against the 49ers, and we've seen it this year, the big run down the sideline against the 49ers in San Francisco. So, I know they have a trip to Buffalo coming up, and, the Bills have, I think, surprised a lot of people considering how many people they lost in the offseason. I mean, you think Buffalo's having a good year and is in trouble? They have 7 wins. So does the rest of the AFC East. So I think that's the next game people are looking at. By the way, for historians, there are 2 long winning streaks in NFL history. One is a regular season streak, and that's owned by the Colts, who won 23 regular season games in a row. The overall streak, including playoffs, belongs to the Patriots. From 2003 to 2004, they won 21 in a row. So keep in mind, the Chiefs are 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah, they are here. Another team is making a run of their own right now is Detroit, who is the top dogs in the NFC here. We've seen now that the runs, the NFC title game last year was not a fluke. They've built on it here. They're positioned to host the NFC playoff games if everything goes their way right now. So from what you've seen, what makes the Lions so successful? They used to be in that bucket with like the dysfunctional organizations. Now they seem to be like a model organization.
Well, they're incredibly balanced. Okay, let's go back to week 1, Mike, when they wound up in a tie game with the Rams on Sunday Night Football. This will show you their mindset. They won the game in overtime, and if memory serves, they never threw the ball in overtime. They just went right down the field with the run. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm sticking to my guns. I don't think they had a passing play in overtime. I might be wrong. Their offense, their balance is incredible. They have a two-headed monster running back. They have a highly efficient quarterback. Their pass rush has been their strength, even though they lost Aiden Hutchinson about a month ago. Or they just got Zadarius Smith from Cleveland, who used to play for the Packers. So it's not that he doesn't know the teams in the division and so on. The general manager, Brad Holmes, has done an outstanding job accumulating talent. Listen, they had some lean years, and they were able to get some high draft picks and so on. Jared Goff has been incredibly accurate. They play with a confidence and they play with a looseness that a lot of other teams probably envy, but they also play extremely physical football, which epitomizes Dan Campbell. That Green Bay game the other day it was a 10-point game, and at least in my mind, it was the score didn't really indicate how much better Detroit was. So, we have now seen them in the last couple of weeks go into Minnesota and into Green Bay and beat two teams that they're right in the mix for. 2 divisional road wins. You can only be impressed with that. And listen, they found it. They embarrassed Dallas. They were tied with Tennessee and then scored the last 38 points of the game. They have a different feel to them. And, Kansas City is undefeated. But as far as who's playing the best football right now, I would have to say it's the Lions.
Yeah, definitely want to keep an eye on the Lions going forward here. And obviously, this has been a season defined by the rookie quarterbacks. So you talked about Jaden Daniels earlier with Washington. Caleb Williams done a good job in Chicago. Bo Nix has the Broncos in playoff position. Drake May showed flashes here. What do you think about this class of rookie quarterbacks?
Well, they've all been impressive to some degree. I think Caleb Williams has been a little erratic. The last couple of weeks, the offense has been a little rough, but they've struggled to score touchdowns. I think there was a little hangover effect last week at Arizona from losing that game at Washington on the Hail Mary. There's a degree of raw talent that we're seeing with Caleb Williams, where he had those. A streak there where, they were scoring points and so on. But I think their offensive line could still use some work. Their defense is fairly solid, but I think he's still learning the position. I think even though he had 2 pretty decent years at Southern Cal, he also made a share of mistakes this past season with the Trojans. Jaden Daniels has just been remarkable. There's a comfort level and a poise that you can see with him, and he will get a test this week because we know the Steelers' history against rookie quarterbacks. He'll see some things this week against Pittsburgh. He hasn't seen. Drake May has come in and been, I think all the Patriots were looking for once they got him into the lineup. He struggled early in camp. He came on late in the preseason. They still went with Jacoby Brissett, but this guy is obviously the future. They need to surround him. With some more. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we saw, quote unquote, I don't like to say it this way, but it was Williams versus Daniels. It's not tennis. They don't play each other. But this week, we're going to see Williams and May. So we saw 1 versus 2, and now we're going to see 1 versus 3.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm going to see how that plays out here. Go quick, generally, some stuff here. Surprise teams. Is there a bigger surprise in the league than Washington, in your opinion?
Probably not. I think are a big surprise. I mean, they did a lot during free agency, but they still go from 4 wins. And here's the thing that some people might not be aware of. This team last year, Mike, gave up 518 points. That's the 3rd most single season in the history of the NFL. Okay? This year, they haven't given up 200 points yet. They got, their 2 losses this year, obviously, pretty quality teams. Tampa Bay was a lot healthier earlier in the season. I know they're struggling a little bit. Obviously, the game with Baltimore, which they were highly competitive, and went back and forth with them. And they're 4-0 at home this year. They've been great against the conference. But I don't think you can dismiss Arizona as well. I mean, this was a team that not only was 4-13 last year, they were 4-13 the year before. And funny enough, Washington blew Arizona's doors off a couple of weeks ago. But Arizona has surprised many people, and I think the thing that's been impressive with them is that win at San Francisco a couple of weeks ago with the late field goal to win a divisional game on the road when you didn't win a divisional game at all last year. So I think, to me, though, you certainly have to look at both of them. I don't think there's any other major shocks. I mean, Atlanta's having a good year. They haven't been in the playoffs since 2017. I don't think anybody's shocked by that, once they brought in Kirk Cousins. But, to me, the Cardinals and the Commanders, slight edge to Washington, but I don't think Arizona's too far behind.
Yeah, I think you may throw Denver and the Chargers in the mix because I don't think expectations were high for either of those teams, but I don't think they're quite the level of the other two.
No, I mean, listen, we expected better things. If you want to say a surprise when it comes to the Chargers, I would say it's their defense. They played 8 games this year, giving up 101 points. Okay, that's staggering, considering where they were. They also won 5 games. They won 5 games all of last year, and by the way, that was a team that was 1-5 in the division. So they have had their moments. Denver, I don't think we're super shocked. I mean, maybe some people by Bo Nix, although he had a good preseason. But you remember, Denver was 8-9, I believe, last year. So they could be on course for another. And they got their doors blown off in Baltimore, so that probably raised some eyebrows. But I guess you could say the Commanders, the Cardinals, and the Chargers defense in that order.
Yeah, let's go the other way because I feel like there's a lot of contenders disappointments. Obviously, the Jets, who we mentioned earlier here. Miami, you can throw an asterisk on the quarterback being injured. Cleveland, the Cowboys. Where do you feel like the biggest disappointment is right now in the NFL?
I think it's the Browns. They've already lost more games than they did all of last season. This was a team that had the number 1 defense in the league, and it's been mediocre this year, even though Myles Garrett has 7 sacks. You can feel like they're already looking toward next year. They traded away Amari Cooper. They traded away Darius Smith. Deshaun Watson's now out for the year, and that's going to be a topic of discussion for the next couple of years, everything they gave up for him. But I think it is the Browns because of how far they came. And Kevin Stefanski has led them to the playoffs 2 of the previous 4 seasons. They won a playoff game back in 2020. They did get, and remember what Stefanski did last year. They had 5 different starting quarterbacks and still managed to win 11 games. To me, I think Cleveland is definitively the biggest. I don't make the Jets have been disappointing, but not the biggest disappointment because of their recent history. Miami, you kind of put that little asterisk on there, I guess, because Tua not being around and so on.
As a Cowboy, I feel like also have the big expectations. They win all these games under Mike McCarthy. They have Jerry Jones saying, we're going all in. They don't really do much the offseason. They have the injuries, and now they're staring basically at a lost season too.
Well, if they're going to be 12-5 for the 4th year in a row, they have to win the rest of their games.
Yeah.
They haven't played the Eagles yet. They get them this week. They haven't played Washington yet. Their defense has been a big disappointment. Marcus Lawrence being out, Micah Parsons being out temporarily. Deron Bland was hurt earlier in the year as well. This was a guy who was a big takeaway factor for them. And I can't get over the fact that going back, and maybe this is a lingering effect, Mike, that loss to the Packers at home, when the Cowboys had won 16 straight home games and then lost 48-32 at home to the Packers in the playoffs. Dallas has now lost 4 straight games at home, gave up at least 40 points in 3 of them, and given up, are you ready for this? They gave up 167 points in 4 home games dating back to that loss to the Packers. I think at times the residual effect of that is bothersome. And, I think you go back to the Chargers last year when the year before they blew that 27-0 lead at Jacksonville in the playoffs. I think that haunted them the entire following season. I know players change. I know coaches change. But sometimes that's something you just don't get out of your system. I think it happened with the Bears last week at Arizona. They were flat as hell after losing that game on the final play of the game.
Yeah, they're worth monitoring here. 2 more questions I want to go to. Number 1, obviously, we're at the halfway point. We both have an idea that what we see the playoff-wise is not going to be what it's going to be in 9 weeks. So, who are these that are outside the field right now you think could get in there by the time the season's over?
Oh, well, obviously you need someone that's playing well and a run. I think tonight is a huge game for the Bengals. They can get back to 500. They can avenge that loss to Baltimore 5 weeks ago, the overtime 41-38 game. Their defense has been shoddy. Baltimore's pass defense has been horrific. So, this could be wound up being, now saying that it could be a wild game and a wind up like 10-7 and so on. So I think Cincinnati has the capabilities of doing that. I don't want to pick Green Bay in the NFC, to be honest with you. They've lost 2 divisional games at home, and Green Bay was a playoff team last year. The Rams got hot late last season. I don't know if they're still capable of that. Seattle's kind of 3-0 and now 4-5. And I think it's tough. We have so many teams in this league that are sitting at 2-6 or 2-7, and it's going to take a 5-game winning streak for them just to get back to 500. So I would say in the AFC, I would say Cincinnati has the capabilities of doing this. And again, this is a team that won the division last year, but I think if Tampa Bay can get Evans and Godwin, we're not going to get Godwin, but if they get Evans back, they were very game the other night at Kansas City. I still think this is a very dangerous team. They got the 49ers this week, and they're heading in the middle of a 3-game losing streak. So for the sake of, and I'm not saying San Francisco won't get there. Remember, you got 7 teams in these playoffs. Tampa Bay, San Francisco, I think is the most intriguing game this week because of which direction both of these teams are headed. San Francisco is a loss away from equaling their loss total from a season ago.
Yeah, that's sort of a good place to wrap up because obviously, I'll look at the Week 10 schedule, but you mentioned San Francisco, Tampa Bay. It's a game nobody's really talking about that is a lot of importance. What other games are you watching for this week you think that could be intriguing to you?
Well, I think Pittsburgh coming off the bye and that defense, so they added Preston Smith. It was not just the pass rusher. That's the thing about Preston Smith. He's a guy also with a lot of playoff experience due to his days with the Packers and so on. He goes back to Washington, very reliable player, stayed healthy for the vast majority of his career. Atlanta, New Orleans is interesting for this reason only, okay? And it's all about Atlanta. They're leading the division, obviously, by 2 games. They are 4-0 in the division already, Mike. And if they beat the Saints, they would have swept the Saints, which means they don't play another divisional game until Week 18. Their schedule early on, they've already played 6 games at home and 4 games in the division. So very, very odd, very odd scheduling. And then we get to Week 11 next week about the Bears and the Steelers, and that's a whole different story. So I'm watching Atlanta for that reason, and that reason only. And Sunday night, Houston, C.J. Stroud was sacked 8 times on Monday night. On Thursday night against the Jets. And now goes against arguably the team playing the best football. By the way, the Lions are plus 110 in point differential. So Detroit, Houston, we have seen Houston struggle against the NFC teams this year. Lost to Green Bay, lost badly to Minnesota. I think that's a kind of a statement. They have to make a good showing. I know the rest of the AFC South is under 500, but the Texans have not seized the moment like a lot of people thought of. Now, I will say this, not having Nico Collins for a spell and now not having Stephon Diggs certainly hurts. They still are getting a big year out of Joe Mixon, by the way. So I would say in that order, Pittsburgh, Washington, Atlanta, New Orleans, focus on Atlanta, and Detroit and Houston.
Yeah, those are all good picks. I'll throw one other sleeper one out here for the local angle as well. Jets going to the Cardinals, I think, is a little intriguing game here because they got Arizona in first place, team that didn't think they would be there all year. You have the rumblings out of the Jets saying, oh, we might figure something out. Here we come. We got the group going, good chemistry. They never play well off the extra rest. They have to fly west now. This is another road game. So sneaky under the radar until that 425 window when the big game might get dinged by injuries, the Cowboys-Eagles.
Well, and of course, and the Giants are playing the Panthers, which to me is, I think I wrote this week, the Giants and Panthers combined have fewer wins than Brian Burns has sacks.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, considering the Giants were able to obtain Brian Burns from the Panthers, and I believe the Giants are leading the league in sacks, despite the fact that they're 2-7.
Yeah. It's a lot of stuff to watch this week, Russell. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to follow on social media, keep up with your football coverage. How can they do that?
Bax Football Guru on Twitter or X or whatever you call it, has all my pieces. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. And one page I like to plug on Facebook, Football Past and Present, which is a great mix of current news and a lot of history. We have a lot of good historians. Some Hall of Fame voters who are writers who contribute to the page. Football Past and Present on Facebook.
Make sure you check that out, guys. Russell, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
You got it, Mike.